Hey guys, I'm Kelly. Welcome back to Sol Sporty. We have some more seeds to start today. It is that time of year. And since I'm still kind of a newbie at this is actually just my second year starting seeds, I thought I would share with you 10 tips that I wish someone had shared with me last year when it was my first year seed starting. I had a lot of successes last year, and I also had a lot of failures that I learned from. And I think it's sometimes helpful when we can learn something from someone who's not an expert, who maybe is still a beginner, but just a little bit further down the road than you are, because it's still fresh, right? It's still fresh in my mind. All the things that I didn't know last year. I know that this whole topic of starting seeds can feel a little overwhelming if you've never done it and you have no idea where to start. That's how I felt last year. And so I just had to get my hands in the soil and do it and figure out what worked for me. So I made some changes this year because I learned from last year. Here's my setup this year. And I would like to share with you some things that worked well for us and some things that we're changing this year. So let's start some seeds. Okay, so today we have some brassicas like our broccoli and cauliflower to start today. We have some herbs to start today. We're gonna start some cabbage today. My cat is going crazy over here. Tip number one is this: don't start too early. I know for me, the temptation is when it hits February-ish, and I start seeing people in other gardening zones starting their seeds. Maybe they're in zone 7 or 8 and they're starting seeds in January and February. I start to get a little panicky. I'm like, oh no, am I late? Am I behind? No, my gardening zone is zone 5B. I am in West Michigan. So our gardening season is a little bit shorter, and our last average frost date is not until the beginning of May. To find your last average frost date, all you need to do is run a Google search and type in last average frost date for, and then your zip code, or you can type in USDA hardiness zone and your zip code, and it'll tell you what your growing zone is and what your last average frost date is. That's important because that helps you know when you can start your seeds and when you can plant them outside. So the temptation for me is to start early, but if you start too early, then the problem is you find yourself with these big, tall plants that you're trying to keep healthy in an unnatural environment until you can safely plant them outside, okay? So you're actually better off starting them a little bit late as opposed to a little bit early. Tip number 2, put something down on your floor wherever you're starting. Now, maybe you're in an area that has concrete flooring, or where it just doesn't matter if you get soil all over the floor. But we're in my basement where I have carpet, and last year we were in our basement at our other house where we had carpet, and I got dirt ground all into the carpet, and that could have totally been avoided if I had just put something down on the floor. A sheet, a tarp, this is just like a painter's blanket or a moving blanket, works great. Save yourself the hassle. It is a very simple tip that will make a big difference. Tip number 3, this is actually multiple tips in one, so you're welcome. Let's talk about soil a little bit. You do not have to use seed starting soil. Did you know that? You can just use regular old potting mix. What you're gonna wanna do though is just go through it with your hands or with a trowel and break up the big clumps, and then pull out some of the bigger sticks. Like this one's pretty small, but you don't necessarily want it in your seed starting. So just pull out the bigger sticks and break up the clumps. Here's another tip. Go ahead and dump all of your soil into a bin. A 5-gallon bucket would work great. This is just a Sterilite bin. It is so much easier than trying to dig it out of the bag that's falling over and you got a small hole. I got dirt everywhere last year. Correction, I got soil everywhere last year. So go ahead and empty it all into a bin like this. It's so much easier to scoop from. The next tip is to pre-moisten your soil. You don't want to get it super wet, but it definitely helps to pre-moisten it. So it should be about the consistency. If you take a handful and you squeeze it, it should sort of hold together, but it shouldn't be dripping water, okay? That is the perfect moisture level for your soil. This is a bonus tip. Get good trays. These are from Bootstrap Farmer. Last year, I got cheap trays from the garden center, wherever I could find them, from big box stores, and they did not hold up. These are really solid trays. Look at this. They're not flimsy at all. These are not gonna break on me. They are a little bit more of an investment, but I will be able to use these for years and years. They're not going anywhere. So this is a 72 cell tray. This is a tray with no holes in it. I like these trays because you can bottom water, which is tip number 5, bottom water. It makes it so much easier if you can just grab a pitcher, lift this out or lift it up, and pour some water in the bottom. Now you do want to come back later and pour any excess off that has not been absorbed into the plants, because you don't want it to just be sitting in standing water, but it makes even watering so much simpler. And then when it comes to daily watering, you might not need to do that because your soil is going to stay moist for longer. You can just come through and spritz the top. You don't want your seedlings to dry out. So if the top looks dry to you, stick your finger in there and see if it's wet through. If it's wet down at the bottom, you're good to go. If it's just dry at the top, just go ahead and hit the tops with a spray bottle and you're good to go. Next tip, label everything. This is a pack of 500 just from Amazon. I like the pretty spring colors. Last year I made the mistake of thinking I would know what things were what, and I did not. So I just had to kind of guess at what was what. It doesn't make such a difference when you're growing things, but if you actually want to remember which variety is which ones you liked that worked well for you, and what seed company it came from, it's very helpful to label everything. So I label with the variety and where it came from so that I can know where I want to order from next year. I will link these in the video description below. So as far as how deep to plant things, it should say on the back of the seed packet how deep you want to plant it. Rule of thumb is to plant twice as deep as the seed is large. So these cauliflower seeds, you can see these are teeny tiny. So these are not going to go very deep. On the package, it says to plant 1/4 to 1/2 inch deep. I will make teeny tiny little indents and drop one in each. I just use the tip of a pen. Now I am planting multiple seeds in one cell. So what I will have to eventually do when they get a little bit bigger is up pot them into a larger pot. But the nice thing about doing it this way is that you save space when you put multiple seeds in one cell, and then you can pick from the strongest seedlings for the ones that you want to up pot. Okay guys, so we just started a whole tray of seeds. And then all we're gonna do is take a spray bottle like this and just kind of mist them all over. Next tip, use a humidity dome. This is a humidity dome, and you just pop it on the top, and what you will see is that condensation will form inside of here, and that is to aid in germination. However, once the majority of your plants germinate, you want to remove the humidity dome because they will start needing light. Your seeds don't actually need any light until they've germinated, until they've popped through. So at that time, then you can go ahead and turn on the lights. But if you leave the humidity dome on too long, you might notice that you'll get some mold or mildew on top. If that happens, just take some vermiculite and sprinkle it on top. I have some stored up there. By the way, you can see my seed starting scenario here is not glamorous. It is not fancy, and that's okay because most people don't have a fancy seed starting setup. A lot of people are starting in basements, as are we. Last year, I didn't even have them started near any kind of light. I was in a dark, cold room. And that's where a lot of people start seeds. And that's okay, it works. And this window doesn't get great light, not nearly enough for them, so I still have to have grow lights on them. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the Humidity Dome on here and go put it up on my rack. All right, next tip. If the place where you're starting seeds is cold, like a basement, you may want to use a heat mat or a germination mat. I have these, it looks like this, and you just plug them in and they just help increase the soil temperature. You want about 65 to 70 degrees is optimal for germination, but after your seeds have germinated, you can go ahead and remove the heat mat. If you leave your seedlings on the heat mat after they've germinated, what might happen is that it can dry out your soil, and so you end up overwatering, and then you get dampening off, or your seedlings just dry out, which is kind of a big deal. It's kind of a bummer. If your seedlings dry out, they're donezo, and you need to start over. Next tip, get yourself a cheap oscillating fan. Get a fan, put it near your plants somewhere. Don't have it blowing directly on them, but have a fan going for a couple of hours a day near your seedlings to simulate wind. This will help make their stems and roots stronger. Some people just go by and just kind of run their hands over them periodically. That works too, but if you're not able to do that, a fan is a really inexpensive and great way to strengthen your seedlings. This one I think was $15. It doesn't have to be fancy, just a little table fan. Tip 9, harden off your seedlings. When you're getting ready to plant them outside, it is a mistake that a lot of newbie gardeners make to take their seedlings from inside in their grow station, wherever they've been at under artificial light, and move them directly outside into the garden. What happens is the sun, the UV rays from the sun are way too strong for the plant, and they scorch the plant and kill it. So what you want to do is something called hardening off. So all you're going to do is you're going to take your seedlings and move them outside about a week before you're ready to plant them out. You're going to move them outside for a couple of hours in the morning, and then you're going to bring them back inside. And then you're going to gradually, over the next week, increase the amount of time that they're outdoors, so that by the time you plant them out in your garden, they will have been getting stronger and gradually being exposed to the strength of the UV rays of the sun. That is something that is very important that a lot of people miss when they're first starting. All right, this is a bonus that is not necessarily one of our tips, but I wanted to show you, these are my tomato seedlings, and they're doing really well. These are the grow lights that I have. These are the ones that I got last year, and I am not a fan of them, and I'll tell you why. Do you see how these seedlings are reaching over toward the light? It is because they want light. They're reaching toward the light. These grow lights do not disperse the light evenly across my seedlings. Next year, I will invest in better lights, but you can see how they're just kind of tilting that way. They're searching for light. What happens when your seedlings are searching for light is that they can get what's called leggy, where your stems get really tall and thin and spindly, and just not very strong, and that's not very good either. So there's a couple of ways, there's a couple of things that I can do to mitigate that. I can be moving these lights at different angles. I can move them down closer to the plants, and I can also rotate this so that all of my seeds are getting equal light. I can do that just daily. These are our onions, and you can see our onions are kind of doing the same thing in some spots also, but overall doing pretty good. And tip 10, finally, don't stress it. I know that this can seem like a bit of a mystery before you've done it, but truly, it's not as complicated as we make it. It's really as simple as putting some seeds in some soil and experimenting. Seeds want to grow, Okay, they want to grow. We have to work pretty hard to get them not to grow. Put them in some soil, give them some light, give them some water. That's really all that they need. You will make mistakes your first year. You will make mistakes your 10th year. You will have seeds that don't germinate. It's just part of gardening. But I can tell you that after 1 year of seed starting, I learned so much. And so I hope that I have taken some of the mystery out of it for you and just get started. The worst that can happen is that they don't come up, right? That's all that can happen. So don't stress it. Just grow some food. Get started. If you enjoyed these tips, we would love and appreciate so much if you would comment and like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.